You ever realize too late that something you brushed off was a warning? That's what this was for me. I thought I was chasing quiet, but what I found wasn't peace. It was something built to keep things in and others out. I booked a solo weekend trip to a lakeside cabin a couple summers ago. It was one of those listings that seemed almost too curated. High-res photos, soft focus, and that warm, rustic charm you only see in catalogs. But I'd been running on fumes for weeks, and something about a quiet place with no service and constant rain just sounded right. The drive up was nothing but gray skies and steady rain. Not a storm, just that kind of endless drizzle that muffles the world and slows everything down. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot beside the cabin, it felt like I'd left the real world behind. The place was as advertised: small, one-bedroom, no Wi-Fi, no TV. A handwritten note on the fridge welcomed me and suggested I enjoy the silence. At the time, I appreciated the sentiment. That first night, I noticed how quiet the bedroom was. Rain slammed against the roof in the living area. I could hear the wind moving the trees, even frogs by the lake. But the bedroom, nothing. I stepped through the doorway, and it was like walking into a vacuum. No hum from the fridge, no creak of the floorboards, just stillness. I figured maybe the insulation was just that good, or maybe the thick woods behind the cabin dampened sound. Still, it was eerie. I tried to sleep, but I kept waking up not from noise, but from the lack of it. My brain, used to constant stimuli, kept waiting for a sound to fill the space. And when none came, it kept me alert. Sometime past midnight, I got up for water. The second I stepped into the kitchen, I heard everything again: the fridge, clicking rain on the roof, the wind outside. I stood there for a minute, grounding myself in those normal sounds. Then I went back to bed, and once again, nothing. It wasn't just quiet. It was unnatural. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I walked the perimeter of the cabin. That's when I saw it. The bedroom window, just one off the back, wasn't a window at all. It was sealed tight with a thick wooden shutter, bolted from the outside. The inside had blinds like the others, but they were covering a flat wooden surface. No glass, just a solid panel. None of the other windows were like that. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was for storms, or maybe the owners were just overly cautious. But then why pretend there was a window at all? That day, I stayed mostly outside. I couldn't bring myself to relax inside anymore. That bedroom started to feel less like a sleeping space and more like a holding cell. The silence in there wasn't peaceful, it was stifling. I started noticing other details. The walls felt thicker, denser. When I knocked, the sound stopped immediately. No echo, no bounce, just absorbed. At some point, I leaned in close to the drywall and whispered. Nothing came back. No resonance. It was like the room refused to acknowledge me. And that's when the thought hit me: what if the silence wasn't for my comfort? What if it was to keep someone else's noise from reaching me? By evening, I was checking every corner. I opened cabinets, looked behind furniture. Finally, in the closet, I found a hatch, a square cut into the floor, almost invisible. I pulled it open. A crawl space. I grabbed my flashlight and leaned down. Dirt floor, support beams, and covering the underside of the floorboards, black acoustic foam, neatly tacked in place. Just as I started to back away, I spotted something, a dull glint wedged between two foam tiles. I reached in and pulled out a small rusted coin, and next to it a broken fingernail. I slammed the hatch shut and backed out of the closet, heart pounding. I didn't understand what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't right. Who soundproofs the floor of a guest cabin? Who goes to that much trouble to make sure nothing gets heard from one specific room? I was sweating. Knees weak, My chest felt tight, like the air was getting thinner. The lights in the cabin suddenly felt dimmer. I couldn't stop picturing myself asleep in that bed, mouth open, unaware, while something beneath me waited. Or listened. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I left the bedroom door open, all the lights on. I sat in bed, fully clothed, heart hammering. Around 3 a.m., I heard a faint creak beneath me. Not loud. Just a slow shift, like weight settling onto a beam. Then just as I held my breath, the light above me flickered. Once, then steadied. The air went cold. My arms broke out in goosebumps. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The silence swallowed it almost instantly. But I knew what I heard. Something or someone was underneath the cabin. At dawn, I packed everything in 15 minutes. I didn't bother cleaning. I left the keys on the kitchen table and I didn't look back as I drove. Back home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I opened the Airbnb app to leave a review or maybe warn someone else. The listing was gone. Completely. Not even a no longer available message. Just wiped. I tried image searching the photos I'd saved. No matches. The place didn't exist anymore. At least not online. I thought about calling the cops. But what would I say that I stayed in a room that was too quiet? Even now, I wonder if anyone else stayed there before me. If anyone's still down there. A couple weeks later, a friend mentioned a solo cabin trip he was planning. Different site, different state. He showed me the pictures, cheery little place near a lake. I swiped through, not expecting anything. And then I saw it. Narrow bedroom. Blinds down. Window not fully visible. I asked him, trying to sound casual, if he could hear the rain from the bedroom. He gave me a weird look and said, "I guess I'll find out." That night he texted me, "Weird question, do most cabins have floor hatches in the closets?" I never replied. And I blocked his number before I could think twice. I don't know if I saved him, but I know I didn't want to know. I still travel alone sometimes, but now I check everything. Every wall, every window. I knock, I listen, I open every closet. If something feels off, I don't explain it away. People talk about peace and quiet like it's always a good thing. But not all silence is peaceful. Some of it is designed, constructed. Now I sleep with a white noise machine. Not to drown out sound, but to make sure it's there. Because there's a difference between quiet and being silenced. This happened during a solo trip through the mountains a couple summers ago. I'd planned to hike a few trails, take some photos, unplug. I booked hostels and cheap lodges along the way, nothing fancy, just a place to sleep. One night, a storm came in hard while I was still driving. Sheets of rain, lightning, way too close for comfort. My GPS glitched out halfway through a national forest road, so I pulled over at the first place with a roof, a small hostel tucked off a gravel path, with a handwritten vacancy sign barely lit in the window. Inside, a man at the desk greeted me like he wasn't expecting anyone. Friendly but stiff. Said there was only one room available, basement level, he called it. Said it was cheaper since most guests don't like the cold down there. He made a joke about mountain ghosts. I laughed. He asked me to pay in cash. The hallway down to the room was narrow and strangely silent. Even my own footsteps didn't echo. I figured it was just thick concrete. The room itself was cold. Not from the weather, just cold. The walls were blank except for a single framed photo of a forest I didn't recognize. No TV, no desk, no mirror. Just a bed, a lamp, and a chair that faced the wall. The sheets were too smooth, like they'd been made by someone trying too hard. And there was a faint smell, like wet stone and something old. Not rot. Not mold. Just used. I remember texting a friend that night and joking, "If I disappear, this is the last ping." But as soon as I hit send, the signal dropped. I couldn't hear the rain anymore. Not from inside that room. Not even when I pressed my ear to the wall. That same storm that had been shaking my car was completely gone down here. I turned off the light to sleep. Within seconds, I turned it back on. I couldn't explain why. It wasn't a sound or movement, just a weight. Like the room didn't want darkness. I left the light on and lay in bed for hours. Every time I blinked, I felt like the shadows shifted just a little, like they resettled. At some point, I got up and checked the door. Still locked, but when I turned back to the room, the chair had moved slightly. It now faced the bed. I froze. I tried to convince myself I bumped it earlier, that I was imagining it. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the chair until morning light filtered in through the one high basement window. My thoughts spiraled. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that the chair hadn't moved, that I was just tired. But something deeper than fear was crawling under my skin, something like recognition. Like I'd felt this before and forgotten. When I stood up, I felt something under my sock, a lump in the thin carpet. I pulled it back and found a loose floorboard. Inside was a small plastic bag. Inside the bag was a phone. Not mine, older model, battery dead. And next to it, a folded note. No name. Just handwriting that said, "Don't let them put you in room 3. I was in room 3. I rushed upstairs planning to demand answers, but the lobby was empty. No clerk, no sign-in book, no computers, just a counter and a coffee mug still steaming. Then I noticed something. All the keys on the board were still hanging. Every one of them. Even mine. I wondered if the chair had faced their bed too. I walked out into the rain. The sound came rushing back. Wind thunder leaves life. My ears actually popped. I jumped in my car, shaking, drove until I reached a main road, found a diner, sat for an hour with coffee and lights and people around me. I finally felt my heart beat again. Later, I checked the phone I'd found. It wouldn't charge. Tech guy said it was water-damaged, old, hopeless, but the SIM still worked. He asked if I wanted the data recovered. I said no. That night in a motel miles away, I double-locked the door and pulled the curtains tight. I didn't sleep. At one point, I swear I heard someone knock 3 times. Quiet, deliberate. It was too quiet, not peaceful, expectant. I didn't open it. Back home, I tried to look up the hostel. Nothing. Not on maps, not on travel sites. No business name, no photos. Like it had been erased. I kept the note, not for proof, just to remind myself that I didn't imagine it. I still don't know if I was the first person to find that bag, or the last. I never drove that route again, not because I'm afraid to see the place, but because I'm afraid I won't. Some nights when the house is too quiet, I open my closet and sit for a few minutes, just to listen. Not for a sound, but to make sure someone else isn't already listening. Some places don't follow you, but they remember you. I still travel light, still take solo trips, but I ask more questions now. I check basements, I check floors, and if I feel like a room wants to be left alone, I leave it alone. Some places aren't dangerous because of what they have in them. They're dangerous because of what they're used to not having. Silence isn't just an absence. Sometimes it's a warning. This happened a few years ago on a solo drive back from a weekend at my mom's. I'd taken the long route home, old highways through the Midwest, the kind that cut through farmland and empty woods. It was supposed to be relaxing. I like driving in the rain. I used to always stop for people stuck out there. Didn't think twice. That night it came down hard. I mean relentless windshield wipers, useless kind of rain. I wasn't in a hurry, so I pulled off at a gas station to grab coffee and check my phone signal. Place was deserted. Not even a clerk inside. Just the hum of the lights and rain hammering the roof. When I got back in my car, that's when I saw him. He was standing under the gas station's broken overhang, maybe 20 feet from my car, soaking wet. No umbrella, no bag, just standing perfectly still and looking straight at me. He didn't wave, didn't signal, just stared. I gave a half nod, the kind you give to a stranger to be polite. No response. He didn't move. I looked down at my coffee for maybe 2 seconds. When I looked back up, he was gone. I scanned the lot. Nothing. There weren't many places to go. Just open pavement and trees. But the guy was gone. I started to feel uneasy. I locked the doors and pulled back onto the highway. A couple miles later, headlights appeared behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I noticed how close they stayed. Not tailgating, just matching my speed exactly. For miles. I changed lanes. So did they. I slowed down. They slowed too. I sped up. Same thing. No other cars around. Just us and the rain. It went on like that for over 20 minutes. I couldn't see who was inside. The rain made it impossible, but the shape of the car, it looked familiar. A dark, beat-up sedan. Older model. Same dent above the left headlight. Same rust patch on the door. It looked exactly like my old car. The one I drove for years before selling it. It had been totaled in an accident. No way it could be the same one. But the match was perfect. Too perfect. That's when I noticed the license plate. Same state. Same plate number. Same frame from the dealership. And one more thing, the back bumper still had the faded college sticker I'd put on years ago. It was my car. I was looking at my own car. I nearly swerved off the road. I tried to stay calm, told myself there had to be a mistake. A coincidence. But the way it followed me, it didn't feel random. It felt personal. I exited the highway, hoping to lose them. They stayed on. I took a random right onto a muddy back road. No streetlights. Just dark forest and mud. I drove fast. No way they could follow without skidding out. But the headlights stayed steady. Same distance. Never gaining. Never falling back. Then, without warning, they turned off. Just blinked out like someone cut a wire. I stopped the car in the middle of the road. I don't know why. I just froze. That's when I saw the shape in my rearview mirror. There was someone standing behind my car. Not in the other one. Just out in the road. In the pouring rain. No headlights. No sound. Just a silhouette backlit by my taillights. Under that red glow, I saw him tilt his head. Slowly, not curious, more like listening. I gripped the wheel and glanced down. That's when the windshield wipers started moving on their own. Slow, deliberate sweeps across dry glass. I hadn't touched the stalk. Then I heard the door lock shift slightly, like something brushed it from the inside. I hit the gas. Drove blind for 5 minutes straight. Didn't care if I hit a tree. I just needed to put distance between me and whatever that was. Eventually, I found a town, pulled into a motel and sat in the lobby until sunrise. Couldn't sleep, couldn't think. I kept checking the window expecting that same car to roll into the lot, but it never did. Next morning, I walked out to my car. Mud caked the tires. Rain still falling. I opened the driver's side door and sitting on my seat was something that hadn't been there before. A keychain. It looked exactly like mine. Same red rubber tag with my old college mascot. Same little tear at the edge. Same initials scratched with a pocket knife. Too perfect. I just stared at it, long enough to know I didn't want to pick it up. I reported it, gave a statement to a local cop who looked half asleep. He said there were no cameras at the gas station, no traffic cams on that stretch of highway, nothing he could do. He asked if I wanted to file a stolen property report. I said no. Some nights when it rains, I check the rearview mirror a little too often. I never saw that car again, but sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd gotten out at that gas station. Just walked over, asked if the guy needed help. Maybe nothing. Maybe worse. I don't know what he wanted, but I know he wasn't finished. Some people don't need to speak to stay with you. I trust gut feelings now. Doesn't matter how polite I want to be or how weird I think I'll look. If something in me says no, I listen. That guy didn't ask for anything, didn't chase me, didn't threaten me. But whatever he was, he knew me. Enough to leave a message I couldn't ignore. Some strangers don't need to speak to leave something behind.